For as long as she could recall, Catalina's gift had been a curse. When she was a little girl, it had cost her more than she could even remember. When you've been without parents for over a decade, you tend to push certain memories from your mind as to ease the loneliness. She was born in Los Angeles to a father who worked as the agent for her up-and-coming actress of a mother. Although Catalina's mother had never become the movie star she aspired to be and even gave her daughter up for, her father was working with other big names. He was the one who had convinced Catalina's mother to give her up to better her career, but there was more to it than that. The young girl was a vivid dreamer, so much so that she could recall or even predict things that she shouldn't know, unnerving her father to a point that he worried she would uncover his cocaine habits and sex addiction. At the time, he believed that Catalina's mother was going to be a big star, and he did not want to lose her to anything. So as to prevent his cheating from getting out, he pressured his talent to give up their child. Catalina spent the next 16 years of her childhood living in various orphanages around the country. She never stayed long and was never adopted due to her increased dreaming, and many people thought that she was a child possessed by the devil. Despite her troubled life, Catalina grew up to be a beautiful woman, more so than her mother ever could be. She kept her black hair short and wore the freckles on her cheeks with pride. While she chose to forget the possibility of ever having a family, she maintained a positive attitude towards the rest of the world and insisted that life could still be good to her. Catalina's 18th birthday was coming up in a few weeks, and she was more than ready to age out of the current orphanage and leave Virginia. For the last 3 years she had stayed here, and although it had been the easiest of her various stays, that did not mean it was easy by definition. The other girls here gave her quite a hard time, and the boys thought she was a freak because of her dreams. They often soaked her bedsheets and threw her clothes away, laughing all the time as they did so. Those who ran the home paid little attention, as orphans were not the top priority of today's society, despite all the talk of pro-life activists and politicians. So Catalina isolated herself from everyone around her, patiently waiting for the day that she could legally escape and find a life of her choosing, and fill it with people who loved her. Until then, her dreams would serve as the blessing she had turned them into. They were her true escape into worlds that she couldn't tell were real or not. Everything changed just a few short weeks before her birthday, when a man had come to visit the orphanage and adopt a teenager. He said that his choice to adopt an older child stemmed from the pain of losing his own teenage daughter. He had blonde hair and blue eyes and the smile of an angel. His body was lean but also built like a weightlifter, truly the ideal body for anyone. He showed no interest in the young men but looked over the various profiles of the girls as if he were looking for the daughter he had lost. He spent an hour in Miss Blevins' office before he seemed to have decided, and Catalina was brought to that same room. She kept her head bowed, and as she entered, she cupped her hands together in front of her waist. For the first time in her life, she wanted to remain unnoticed. "Good afternoon, Catalina," Miss Blevins greeted her in a neutral tone without looking from her own desk. Miss Blevins was actually someone who didn't despise or estrange the young girl, insisting in her own way, through protective rules and education, that she was worthy of happiness and love. She was the nun who helped run the orphanage, alongside a priest and a businessman. Catalina glanced up and saw that Miss Blevins seemed to be in her timid spirits today. "Hello, Miss Blevins," Catalina responded and hid her face once more. "Catalina, there is someone I would like for you to meet," the nun said, and the man stepped forward to introduce himself. He raised his hand and said, "Hello, Catalina. My name is Evan Michaels." Catalina shot a look at him and then turned away. She knew what was going on, but she wished she could stop it. Why would she want to grow attached to someone, only to age out of their home in a few weeks? Adopted or not, She was going on her own after her 18th birthday and seeing the world for herself. That much had been absolutely decided. She reluctantly reached forward and shook his surprisingly smooth yet firm hand. "I've heard a lot about you, young lady," he said with a smile that for some reason unnerved Catalina. "It sounds to me like you're a very special person, with a heart to match," Evan continued. "It just upsets me to think about how long you've gone without a family, or someone who loves you for you." "I've managed," Catalina answered him honestly, and she found the confidence to look up at him. "And I'll have a family one day." "My daughter was special, like you," Evan told her as he turned to look out the window. "Her favorite place to be was outside, where she couldn't control anything about it. The temperature, the wind, how clean or dirty it was. She was special like that. I guess what I'm saying," Evan kept going, looking away from the window and back at Catalina, "is that I want to give another special person what they deserve. Can you help me do that, Catalina?" "How?" was all the girl could say, but for some reason she didn't feel comfortable. "May I ask, when you dream, do you always see from your own perspective?" Evan placed the question carefully, and he waited with great interest for Catalina to answer him. She frowned and then nodded, saying, "Yes, but it's not always that clear." Evan raised a curious eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean?" Catalina sighed, answering, "It's always me, but there are distinct differences. Almost like it's a different me. I don't know if that makes any sense, but on the contrary, it does." Evan cut her off, and he looked at Miss Blevins. "I like her," he chirped joyously and looked back at Catalina. "Do you want a home to call your own, Catalina?" The young woman made a face that displayed her conflicted mind. She wanted to tell him no for more than one reason, but she wasn't the confrontational type. Catalina had spent too much of her life being a listener, saying as little as she had to. This gave rise to the inability of speaking up for herself. I don't know." Catalina tried, and the moment she noticed the unhappy facial twitch that Evan tried to hide, she knew that she couldn't go home with him. Regardless of what happened, she had to say something. "I can promise that you'll be happy," Evan insisted, his eyebrows diving inwards to show his concern. "I've adopted others like you, and they'd be delighted to meet you. I can assure you they all live in a lovely home, the same home I would like to share with you." Catalina trembled and shook her head. "I'm leaving this place in a few weeks, and I'm traveling the world. Please don't tie me down somewhere I don't want to be. I've lived long enough to decide my own life. I want to stay here." Evan eyed her for a moment and then turned his attention to the woman sitting behind a desk. "Surely you can convince her that she deserves a loving family, yes?" he asked the nun, and she exhaled the deep breath of someone annoyed. "As much as I would like to give her a home, Mr. Michaels, I cannot force her to go with someone she does not feel comfortable, especially so close to her 18th birthday." Miss Blevins explained, and Evan smiled. "Miss Blevins," he began, "I must insist that you reconsider. I am willing to pay far beyond what you require for adoption." "That's not appropriate, Mr. Michaels," the nun replied, shocked to have heard such desperation. "If the young girl is only weeks away from living life her own way, then who am I, rather who are we, to take that choice away from her?" "Catalina," Evan looked to the young woman again, who was nervous but had made her decision. The man could see that from the look on her face. Her eyes spoke the truth. That would always be his favorite thing about her. "Don't make this hard," he finally whispered, creeping out both Catalina and Miss Blevins. "Please come with me," Evan spoke again, and the nun rose from her chair, having heard enough from him. "The answer is no, Mr. Michaels," she snapped, and her glare showed that she was serious. "Now I must ask you to leave." "Okay then," Evan groaned. and his hand reached into his pocket to reveal he was carrying a small pistol. He aimed the barrel at Miss Blevins' head and quickly pulled the trigger, emptying her brains across the room. Catalina screamed, her face covered in blood and her body unable to move from where she stood. Even in her dreams, she had never witnessed a murder or even natural death. This was something all too real and new for her. Miss Evans' body collapsed forward, and she laid over her desk in a heap that brought tears to Catalina's eyes. "Come on," Evans said, and his entire demeanor changed to match the evil he had just shown. He snatched Catalina's wrists and kicked the office door open, dragging her out behind him. "No!" she shouted and then tried to jerk away. When she did, various windows and other doors were smashed in, and a flood of soldiers swept into the building. The onslaught that followed would haunt Catalina well past the day she escaped this man's grasp. "We've got to clean house," Evan explained to her and pulled harder. "We can't have a trail of any kind. The work is too important. Now come on!" Catalina cried and whimpered as this large man with the face of an angel acted demonically. They reached the front door of the orphanage and it had already been kicked in. Almost everyone else in the building had been executed at this point. Evan glanced back at the bullet-ridden walls and laughed. "This wasn't how I expected my first pickup to go, you know," he said to Catalina, and his eyes found hers. "But I can be honest with you now. I prefer the violence over manipulation. It's more honest. As excellent of a liar as I may be, I love telling the truth. But nonetheless, this should get me the internship I need, and he'll recognize my genius." Who? Catalina asked, terrified. "Dr. Phillips," Evan said excitedly. "He's going to be thrilled to meet you."